happen.
All right.
Okay, we're doing this thing.
All right. Good morning. We have, in this little area, already had our adrenaline rush for the morning. So from here, we're just going to be coasting. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. I appreciate all the messages I received asking me what the heck was going on. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and sorry. I'm going to jump right into our introduction of our wonderful presenter today, Lisa Quackenbush. She is a strategist, a skill builder, and a presentation coach. In her 20 plus years of interview coaching, Lisa has helped her clients and colleagues win well over $100 million in net architecture fees alone and counting. And I know that Lisa loves to win, so I know she is counting. Prior to founding AEC Coach, which is her interview and presentation consultancy, she worked in-house and consulted with leading Boston area cultural institutions and architecture firms across the city, including Biddy Clancy, Cambridge 7, Architectural Resources Cambridge, Marianne Thompson, Coleman McKinnell & Wood, Ann Beha, and I'll stop before I name every architecture firm on this call. Her impressive career began with several years in broadcast journalism that included 2 Emmy Award nominations. Her expertise includes public relations, communications, marketing, and business development. But now, winning AEC interviews is her sole focus. And we are so lucky to have her joining us this morning. Lisa, thank you for being here, and thank you for persevering through technical challenges.
Operator error. It was definitely all my fault. Thank you very much, all of you, for bearing with me. So let's just jump right in. So Kate, if you'd hit the next slide, please. This is part of our technical difficulties. So you're just going to hear me say, next slide, please, the whole time. Next slide, please. Did it change?
Sorry. Yeah, I've got it going on here. Sorry. And I'm on. You know what? I tested it and it worked before.
This is the morning we're having. In a way, I wish I had set this up, because this is what happens in real life. We are in it right now. So here we are. I'm very excited to talk to you all about this idea, which haunts me, compels me. We all deal with it constantly in our industry. I think we have the toughest sales process in all of business. And invariably, you think you've nailed it. You feel great about the interview. And then you find out you didn't win. The first question everyone asks is, but we were the best team. Why did we lose? So that's what this presentation is about. It's about why the best team loses, or at least a new theory I have about why the best team loses. Next slide, please. As we all know, the pandemic hit, changed everything. Some things became a little bit easier. Some things became much, much harder. Next slide, please. And one of the things that I was really interested in was, in the middle of all this change, of things becoming infinitely more complex, when RFPs hit the street, and admittedly, there weren't many of them at times, why was the design team, the engineering team, why weren't, under these circumstances, hiring based on the proposal? There's tons of information in the proposal. It should give you, frankly, everything you need to know to make a really solid decision. I hear you asking now, but they have specific questions that weren't in the proposal. Well, email us those questions. We'll huddle, we'll answer those questions, and then you can decide. Next slide, please. So I was amazed that shortlist interviews didn't go away. They got harder, but they didn't go away. Next, please. As you all know, I don't even need to tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. Winning work is mission critical in our industry. It is the lifeblood of our firms. It's what keeps us afloat. It helps us hang on to our best talent. It is immeasurably important. So as Kate said, throughout my life, I've done many things. This is my sole focus because this is what absolutely fascinates me. It is, in my opinion, the thing. Next slide, please. The scary thing about not winning is that not winning, aka losing, becomes a habit. I've seen over the course of my career that people begin to lose confidence. You go for a project, you really want it. Maybe you've tracked it for years and then you don't win it, and it's crushing. And it's hard to get over that. And if you have a string of those, some rotten luck, it starts to become almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a domino effect, and people begin to ask, have we forgotten how to win? Next slide, please. A little bit about me. Kate can tell you this. Pretty much everybody who knows me can tell you I am a wildly competitive person. I've always been a competitive person, whether it was games when I was a little kid or sports. I think there's virtue in winning. I believe in trying hard. I believe in leaving it all out on the field. I hate to lose more than I love to win. So actually, hatred of losing is what fuels me. Next slide, please. The thing about competing is, you put this time, this effort, this energy, this focus into winning, into coming out on top. And it doesn't always go your way. It doesn't always work out the way you want it to, the way you need it to. And as people in the design and construction industry, we're asked to brush off our knees, bounce right back up, and get ready to do it all over again. And that's hard, and that takes resilience. Next slide, please. So how do we do it in our industry? Not in a very good way. I'll just say that. How are people learning these skills? It's not part of design education. Invariably, what firms resort to is the old trial and error method. That basically means my firm has identified me as somebody with great potential, and I'm on the proposal. So you're just going to pull me into the interview team, and I will do my best, and hopefully I'll help the team win. Well, what if the person who's leading that interview process isn't a very good public speaker? What if they don't have good instincts? What if they don't really have a strong handle on strategy? What if there are hidden and complicated issues interpersonally among that team? The point is, what happens all the time is that younger professionals go into these interviews and they are very ill prepared. Sometimes they sink, sometimes they swim. Next slide, please. So for me, I always start interview prep with one very specific question. Why should your team win? People love this question. And they start throwing out answers right away. And they're convinced and they believe it. Next slide, please. And this is what I hear. I hear the same ideas, the same reasons from every team I talk to. You literally can cherry pick this list for probably every pursuit you've done in the last 18 months or so and find one that works for you. So when everybody has the same version of the list, where's the differentiation? Next slide, please. So this is a quote from the principal of a national, very well-known planning and design firm. And we've been talking about this idea for some time. I think she sums it up beautifully here. We compete with the same handful of firms, and they're all talented. So where is that special something that helps firms stand apart from the crowd. Next slide, please. So we're going to do a little process here. So let's say that I have just shortlisted 4 firms. I'm on the selection committee, and it's for a new campus library. You know, all 4 firms feel pretty good about it. They're excited to be shortlisted. The proposal was great because you all did it. And firm A comes in and they feel super confident. They probably believe they're the front runner because they have done tons of beautiful campus libraries at very prestigious institutions, and their work is great. Next slide, please. Then firm number 2 shows up, and they think, well, we're on the short list. We're on the short list because we believe the campus library is a broken model. Nobody needs a new campus library. They need active spaces, not just stacks of books and tables. They need learning spaces and maker spaces. So they're feeling great about it too, because remember, they're on the short list. Next slide, please. Now, here's the firm that I would consider like the Goldilocks of all of this. They've done some well-respected traditional libraries on college campuses, so they're kind of a safe bet in that way. But recently, they've also started doing more innovative work. They think they're kind of the best of both. And if they shortlisted those other 2 firms, well, wow, we are at the intersection of all of this. So of course, we're going to do great. Next slide, please. And then there's the 4th shortlisted firm. They've done almost all of the best and most beautiful projects on this campus. They're extremely well regarded. Of course, they can do a library. They do all architecture, and they have a great library consultant. Next slide, please. So, firm A, firm B, firm C, firm D. The horrible thing about this is I've probably coached firm A, B, C, D, or the equivalent multiple times. The really hard part about all of this is 3 of them are about to lose, and they're probably not going to understand why. Next slide, please. So, as part of my practice, basically I train when I'm training for a specific pursuit. The same general group for each of these categories: architecture, engineering, construction. These are the people you're probably used to seeing in interviews. If you have one of these roles, probably you're participating in interviews or hope to participate in interviews. So, we do our best. Firms do our best to put together the right team, the team that's capable of winning it. But sometimes the people we really want aren't available. So you put the best cards out there you can, and frankly, you just have to play the hand you're dealt. Next slide, please. This is the rest of that quote I showed you before. And it's really the part of all this that just gets me. It's this idea that when a young professional or a mid-career person who doesn't interview very often isn't successful, it hurts. They feel it. They feel responsible. They might even feel like they jeopardize their position somehow, or that by losing, there might be layoffs or other awful things might happen. Maybe senior leaders who do this kind of thing all the time have that, brush it off, let's move on to the next one kind of thing. But I guarantee you, people in their 30s, 40s, younger mid-career professionals do not have that skill yet, and it stays with you. Next slide, please. So, time to get a little interactive. So, I have a series of 7 questions. This is the first one. It's kind of a layup. And I'm interested in hearing what you think about all of this. So Kate, or Sandy, is there anything else that people need to do in order to participate in the poll? I think this should be everything, but then again, I am no technical genius, as we all saw earlier today. So just let me know. Is it working for everybody? Hope so.
I just got in. I just texted Lisa Quack and BO40 to 22333. And now I'm going to do my industry, and you can see whether you're getting responses, I guess.
Did you also want to put the .com in the chat? If people want to go through their browser?
Sure.
So I think because I am,
that's a typo.
I am presenting. I actually, I'm sort of just a participant, unfortunately. I can't actually see the data as it's coming in. So Sandy, if you wouldn't mind just letting me know when you feel like we've reached critical mass and we can move on to the next question.
Oh, Kate can do that. Kate, you can do that?
I will find out. I think, Lisa, in order to do that, I need to log in as you.
Well, this is all getting fascinating. Are people able to answer the question at least?
I was.
How about everybody else?
I go through the browser and it doesn't have that question. It's asking a different question. It's asking, when have you won or lost a proposal, with 5 other options.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, of all the questions, this is sort of one contingency that worked out properly. This is kind of the throwaway question, just to get everybody up and running on the polling technology. So we can actually move on to the next question, which I would say is really the first of the important ones. The selection committee is more likely to choose your team if you show A, strong project examples, B, relevant expertise, C, team cohesiveness, D, strong leadership, E, demonstrated discipline around budget and schedule, F, other. Are we ready to move on to the next one? Okay. A second kind of important question. Your PIC project executive must A, show passion for the project, B, demonstrate thought leadership in the profession, C, know the client, institution, or owner, D, be a hands-on leader, E, understand the mission, F, other. Okay, moving on. And by the way, we will be revisiting these questions in about 15 minutes and having a larger discussion about them. So this is just sort of the first moment of interactivity that we're going to have. So here's the next question. Which team member most often carries the day? A, the PIC project executive. B, the project manager. C, the programmer planner. D, the project architect designer. E, a key discipline lead. F, other. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about all of this. Get your feedback. I had a good time doing this with Kate earlier, so we'll see. We'll see what we all think. Okay, next question. As a member of the selection committee, what do I fear most? A, project goes over budget. B, the project doesn't get funding. C, the AEC team made promises it didn't keep. E, the program does not achieve the mission. Or F, other. Next slide, please. Which of these is a fatal flaw deal killer in an interview? A, arrogance. B, rudeness to team members. C, not showing design ideas. D, not addressing the topics that you were asked to speak to. E, nervousness. F, other.
So we've had a little back and forth in the chat. I just want to jump in at this point for anybody who's not crazily monitoring the chat like me. Folks aren't able to enter their answers in advance right now in the polling app. So what I've suggested is that people try to remember their answers, write them down if you need to, but just remember them. We're going to go back through and Lisa's going to speak to each of these questions. And the information coming from that is probably the most important part. So sorry again for our technical difficulties. We'll get through it together.
Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me. Sorry that this is a little bumpier than we would all like it to be. So I don't know, have we already done this question? Which of these is a fatal flaw deal killer in an interview? I think we did. Hopefully you have, if you're able to, answered or at least written down your answer on a piece of paper, old school style. Next question, please.
I'm glad that technical issues wasn't a deal killer on the list. That's good.
I know. Oh my God, that would have been really a fabulous moment for all of us, wouldn't it? Projects are won and lost. A, when the team is first put together. B, when the committee reviews the proposals submitted. C, during interview prep, rehearsal. D, during the presentation. E, during Q&A. F, other. Okay, next slide, please. So, thank you for participating in those questions. I guess this is the point now where I want to tell you the past 18 months, 2 years, I'm doing a lot of thinking about this. I think the pandemic has either given us more or less time to think. I've taken the time to really think about what's going on here exactly. If differentiators are so difficult to come by, so difficult to communicate. How are people making decisions? Next slide, please. Remember the list? Remember all of this overlap? Next slide, please. I think of that list that we all have in some form or fashion as the justification. What do I mean by justification? I mean that is the public face of why you were chosen. It is the thing a selection committee member can use to explain why your team was picked. They've done all the best campus libraries. They're reinventing campus libraries. They've done some, but they have great new ideas. They're our favorite architect. We love working with them, and they have a fabulous library consultant. This is what people have to say is the reason behind the choice. Next slide, please. But I don't really think it's why the choice is being made the way it is. Because in my mind, there are three pieces of the puzzle. Two of them are here: justification, the list, the public face, the CYA, if you will. And I think the second piece is emotion. Next slide, please. And what I mean by emotion is, how is your team making them feel? It's time to get personal. It's time to talk about the energy your team is giving to the room, how you are together, how you are being viewed individually. Emotion is really, in my opinion, what is fueling these decisions. Next slide, please. The thing about it is, the reason you're not hired off the proposal is that human beings need to suss each other out in person. We need to hear from you. We need to see you. We need to get your vibe. So now the question becomes, the emotions, of course, I want the team, the selection committee, to know about my team. I want us to think that we're trustworthy, that we're likable, that we're warm. That can only help in our bid to be selected for the project. But you can't show those things on a slide. You just can't. Next slide, please. So in my experience, again, over 20 years, by the way, I work under non-disclosure. So some of my clients are known, some of them aren't. Kate gave you a few of them, but across this swath of people and firms that I've been working with, I've determined that there's an ideal interview mindset. If you can achieve this mindset, you're going to be in good shape. And what is it? It is when you're relaxed, you're enthusiastic, you're warm, you're present, and you're encouraging. You're encouraging to members of the selection committee, you're encouraging to your own teammates. It's just a really, really good way to be in that room. And the reason for it is, when you're that way, it increases this feeling of trust and likability and connection and confidence and comfort that the committee has with you. And it decreases all of those other negative emotions, which are the flip side of the emotion coin: uneasiness, skepticism, apathy, criticism, cynicism. So that ideal interview mindset is really important. Next slide, please. So I've been digging into this a little bit recently, and what I've determined is that trust is the crux of getting to yes. The Keller Institute has research, and it has described what it calls the 7 influence traits. They call it influence. I think of it as how do you move the needle? How do you persuade somebody? How do you get to yes? So here are their 7 characteristics. But notice the last one, trustworthiness. That is the most crucial of all 7. Next slide, please. I've also been really fascinated by the Kellogg School of Management's new trust project. God knows trust has taken a hit, I would say, in this last administration and in life in general. So they're really digging into this idea of how do you trust someone? What's the basis for trust? And essentially what the researchers have concluded is that there are three main elements to trust. Competence, a sense that you know how to do the job, the list basically. Honesty and integrity, that your word is good. And the last one, and I love this last one, is benevolence, that you have the owner, the client's best interests at heart. You're keeping them top of mind. Next slide, please. And one of the things I really love about this is that, again, this Trust Project research has determined that when you combine integrity, honesty with benevolence, what you get is warmth. And warmth is a crucial aspect to having a successful interview. And I'm amazed because they've actually said warmth is judged within 100 milliseconds. Now, I have no idea how short that actually is, but even if we expanded it to 100 seconds, I think you'll agree we make up our minds intuitively and rather quickly about whether we think someone is warm or not. Next slide, please. The thing about talking about emotions as the basis for decision making is that it's uncomfortable. It's an intuitive thing. It happens to all of us in all aspects of our life, but it doesn't seem very business appropriate somehow. It seems like a selection committee member would be almost irresponsible to say that, we've given that $400 million project to a team because we like them better. We just thought, oh, we're going to be hanging out with these people for 3 or 4 years. I just straight up like them better. But I think that really is a big part of the reason. And again, they go back to the CYA, the list, and that makes the emotion that's driving the decision acceptable. Next slide, please. And I think there's a third piece of this puzzle. So we have justification, the list, we have emotion, how are you making them feel? And then we have inspiration. Architects use this word inspiration all the time. Designers do too. Here's what I mean by inspiration. Next slide, please. Inspiration, to me, is literally defined as the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially to do something creative. It's a motivating force. So this is the thing that takes your team from being competent and well-liked and well-regarded to being the team we must work with. Next slide, please. Kate's heard me say this all the time. If inspiration leads to action, where is it in your presentation? What's the wow moment? Where is the moment where you have created something so smart, so compelling, so wonderful that everybody in the selection committee can breathe a huge sigh of relief and say, okay, we found our team. Their vision for our project is so incredible. We want to start right now. We can't wait to get started. We almost don't want to hear from other teams because we have already decided that this team is our team. Next slide, please. So we've returned to our original question. Why does the best team lose? I believe, next slide, please, that the best team loses because it has fallen short in one or more of these three areas: in justification, in emotion, in inspiration. They just didn't. I don't even want to say check all the boxes because that's justification. But they have not covered all their bases as well as they might have. Next slide, please. So I say this to my clients all the time. I say it here again. For all of you, if you're coaching internal teams, please know it's important to stress that perfection is impossible. You're never going to really hit it exactly as in hindsight you wish it could have been. It's just not going to happen. However, in getting ready, in doing prep, improvement is always the goal, and improvement is always to be acknowledged and admired. Next slide, please. So I have a particular framework I use with my clients. We can certainly dig into this a little bit more if you have questions or you'd like to hear more about it. But in the meantime, it's 6 steps. It's think. You know, again, I told you I started with that differentiator question, you know, why should your team win? But also it's why should your team lose? Why do you think the other firms are on the list? It's all important to talk about. Then you move on to the planning stage, which is really the conversation. It's figuring out the strategy. It's figuring out what your team needs to do or say or show to get to a yes. Is the team aligned? Do they understand the mission? The third step is create. What often happens, I've found in architecture firms in particular, is everybody wants to start designing things right away. Well, I think you first have to understand the strategy. You have to understand the reason you're creating that thing, the reason you're showing that design. And if you skip ahead too much, it's just not as powerful as it could be. Next slide, please. And then we move on to the rehearsal phase. And rehearsal takes all different shapes and forms, depending on which firm I'm working with, which pursuit we're prepping for. But it's really about making sure your messages are the right ones, that you're talking about benefits to the client, that you're identifying the problems you're trying to solve. You're making sure it's emotional and inspiring and interesting. And then you refine it, run it through for time, see where you can slightly rearrange the pieces. Remember, this is all about the story arc, building emotion. You want to come in hot, as I like to say, come in with a great deal of energy, and then you want to bury the boring stuff or the less interesting stuff, the messy stuff somewhere in the middle, and then you want to finish strong. You want to go into Q&A with a head of steam and some momentum, and then deliver. Often I am in the room, particularly when I was principal at Goody Clancy, I would be in the room. And that's a really important moment, particularly in terms of continuous improvement. Did you execute against the strategy? Not, were you perfect? Did you use exactly the right words? Were your ideas strong? Next slide, please. So prep, it's different every time. But here are some of the things that I tend to talk about during interview prep. If you've done prep with me, you've seen some of these, you know what they're about. Again, I don't want to take too much time right now, but we can certainly dig into that a little bit later. Next slide, please. There is always this, what I call the F-it moment of interview prep. And it doesn't just mean like, okay, we're washing our hands with this whole thing. It's a magical moment when fear and fatigue and friction give way to fun and focus and flow. It's an amazing gift when this happens. It tells you you're on the right track. For me, it's that moment where, oh my gosh, we actually have a presentation. We actually have something to say. We know what we're going to say. We can say it in the right amount of time. And then it's a step after that where it starts to really, I personally know it because the hairs on the back of my neck stand up a little. Next slide, please. So this is a question I get a lot. And if you are in marketing or you interview a lot, you have to work with the team members who are on the proposal, who are available to you for that particular project. So I get asked this question all the time. What if our team's just not likable? And what if, most of us are likable, but there's that one person that's just not holding up their end of the deal. So I'm going to describe this as code name Bad Onion. So code name Bad Onion, in my experience, is that person who is creating a lot of friction, a lot of tension as you're doing interview prep. They could be a good public speaker, or more likely, they're probably not a great public speaker, but they don't actually care that much about getting better. Maybe they're really critical of other team members. They're not really sure what's going on out there, how other teams are doing it. So they're setting a very low bar for themselves and for the rest of the team. Next slide, please. And, it's my job and your job, if you coach your internal teams, is to make delicious soup anyway. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, yes, you have this bad onion, but you need an onion in the dish. And really, it's about focusing on how delicious the soup actually is. So my shorthand kind of quick advice, if you're in this situation, is use less of it, turn it into a background ingredient, pair it with other tasty, lively ingredients to provide a little lift to that onion. Shore up that onion flavor with some other oniony kinds of vegetables, ingredients, and this I think is the most important part, and this works time and again. Develop a level of trust, privacy, develop a strong enough relationship where you can gently peel back those outer layers. Because often that onion is really kind of delicious below the surface. So you just have to have the patience to get there. Next slide, please. So we're going to revisit our questions in a second, but here are some final thoughts. Again, if your firm is in a position to hire someone like me and you're doing this work yourself, the takeaways that I'm hoping you'll get out of this presentation is rehearse now with this idea of justification, emotion, and inspiration in mind. Check in on your team. Make sure you're really touching on all of those categories. Think about this ideal mindset and work really hard to help your team achieve that ideal mindset. You will be more likable, more present, less nervous, the better you know your material. We've all seen it. We know that that's true. The PowerPoint is not the proposal. The PowerPoint is also not the interview. The people are the interview. The PowerPoint is the eyewash behind the people. It's the ideas that the people are communicating. Support your teammates, embrace the pressure, fight to leave it all on the field. It's going to be hard. It always is. Wouldn't you rather be exhausted feeling like you did the very best you could? I would. And last but not least, think about improvement. Think about the virtue of performing well, even if the outcome isn't what you expected. So I've done a lot of talking, so let's now move into the questions and open it up. So next slide, please. I'm repeating the questions here. So with everything that we've just discussed, does anyone think that they would choose something different than they might have chosen the first time around? I'm hoping someone's talking and you're just muted.
Lisa, I've worked with you for so many years. I have absolutely absorbed what you did somehow. And 10 years plus later, I'm totally trying to do this with my team. So my answers aren't going to probably change too much.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, here's where I expected to be able to see what your responses actually were. So, does anybody have that data?
I think it got lost when different people were running the PowerPoint, Lisa. I'm so sorry to
No.
say. So we can either have everybody type their answers into the chat real fast, or we can have brave volunteers share their experience.
Well, that's a great idea. So, however you want to do it, if someone would monitor the chat, if you would just enter your answer for this particular question. I'd really like to hear from somebody whose answer changed from where they were in the beginning to where they are now. And I'd love to hear you just expand on your reasoning for the change.
I'll
Okay,
go.
ahead.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
So initially, I don't even remember what I said, but what I would say now is team cohesiveness, just because it seems that based on what you've said, that all of these other things might be the justification for choosing the winning firm, but cohesiveness kind of implies warmth or an emotional connection with the the potential client.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'll speak up for the chat monitoring voice. I'm seeing a lot of C's, and then some folks who would have chosen something else, but now think they probably should choose C. And then there's a couple of folks who are in the F category, me included, who think that it's some sort of alchemy that's like about knowing the client and connecting with them and understanding their needs.
So, who feels really strongly that that it should be about team cohesiveness? Does anybody want to take that one? I believe that was you, Jennifer. I think that that Jennifer said it really well. But how confident are you in this answer? Pretty confident? Jennifer?
So among the answers that are here, I'm very confident, unless it's other.
Well, in my mind, and by the way, remind me, this I think you were muted for a second, and I have been thinking about if we ever turned "you're on mute" to a drinking game, we would all be absolutely drunk all day, every day. So, yes, I agree with that. Of the choices listed here, it's probably the one I personally would agree with the most. However, I think it's F. And the reason I think it's F is because it's really about their belief that you will take good care of them, that they are your priority, that you are passionate and excited about the project. They already believe you have the skills to do it, but that it matters to you, and that it mattering to them matters to you. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any comments about that one? Okay, so let's move on to the next question.
Lisa, before you get off that,
Oh, uh-huh.
I agree with what you said. And I would sum it up as chemistry. I mean, that brings it together where the client feels that you care about them, but that interaction is what I call chemistry. So it's you communicated who you are, and they responded to it, and that made the soup. I like your description. So I would call that chemistry.
Right. I think the thing about this is, we all know really charismatic people. By the way, in interview prep, my job is not to make, an equivalent of a team of Stepford wives where everyone's smiling identically and everybody's super charismatic. They should be on Broadway. That's really not the point. Everybody has to be the onion they are. And I think about it. I use dating, sports, and cooking analogies a lot in prep, as most of you know. So I think the piece here is really chemistry almost sounds like charisma. Charisma is a great thing to have if you have it. This is something even a little deeper because it goes back to this idea of benevolence. It goes back to this idea of good intentions. So yes, there's chemistry involved, but I think there's something even more precious and important going on here. But thank you, thanks for the feedback too. So if we move on to the next question, your PIC project executive must. When the answers come into the chat, let me know. But is there a brave soul out there who wants to jump in on this one? And has anybody actually changed their answer from the first time through? Okay.
Roger Goldstein has offered a criticism. You need an all of the above choice. I would argue that F is could be all of the above because other is very open-ended. Roger.
Well,
Feel free to
thank you.
type it in.
Thank you, Kate. That's very Roger of you, Roger. Yes. So other can certainly mean all of the above.
I'm seeing a wide variety in the responses that people are typing into the chat. There are perhaps more A's than actually A and E is maybe tied, and now people are typing in F all of the above. So thanks, Roger.
Does anybody want to speak up about why they chose why they made the choice they did? Interactivity is hard on Zoom, isn't it? It's hard.
Lisa, I'll jump in.
Okay.
I think.
Thank you.
I think in the context in particular of all the things that you've said and concluded, I think the passion, the emotion is more important. The rest of these things are part of the qualifications. And if you've already gotten to the interview, you would have demonstrated B, C, probably D and E. So the passion matters more than the others, in my opinion.
Yep. Anybody else?
I think it's all of the above, only because we have had many debriefs with clients. And what happens is that sometimes people who are in the interview doesn't actually see the proposal because they either couldn't do it or they were not invited. So we have had so many different responses every time, and you have to tick every box. That is the difficulty. And then the icing on the cake is being to interview well. So I can't really choose one because there's so many of them. And that's why it's so challenging.
Well, all very true, and thank you both for jumping in here. In my opinion, the answer is F, and not the all of the above. F, because I think what your PIC, what your project executive has to show is that somehow they can be trusted, that when things go wrong, they have the competence, the authority, the empathy, the benevolence to do what is required to rescue that project, to rescue that team. It's also an emotional reason, but in particular, the weight of this falls on the PIC, the project executive, because they are ultimately the people who are on the hook when things start to go wrong. And more than anything, that person needs to show that they are worthy of the trust that the selection committee would like to put in them. Any other comments, thoughts, questions on this before we move on?
Lisa, that's interesting. How does someone go into an interview and show that particular thing? Like, we had this project, a lot of stuff went bad, but hey, you know, it worked out well and we're happy with it. I mean, how do they talk about that?
That's a great follow-up question. So, you know, this idea of perfection that I was talking about before, we've all had things go south in the middle of projects. Everyone fails all the time to, you know, different levels, but everybody fails. It's really, what do you do in recovering the situation? I think it's perfectly okay. I would argue it's really an amazing moment when someone can tell a story, a very human story about something that went wrong, something important that went wrong, and how it was addressed. That's how you build trust. You're also subtly building trust in terms of how gracious and warm you are to your teammates. Are you present when they say something? Are you nodding? Are you responding? Are you taking care of the team? Because if you can show you're taking care of your own team, the natural leap is that you will also take care of the wider team, which includes the client. So you demonstrate it in lots of ways. I'm not saying this is still a first date after all. So I'm not saying on the first date we want to say, you know, I'm an inveterate gambler and I like littering, and, you know, it's not that kind of moment. But it's really find a story that works, you know, of something that didn't quite go the way it should have, and how it hurt, how you were bothered by it, and how you rallied the troops to fix it. Don't shy away from those stories, because fundamentally that's what people are buying. Somebody who's holding down the fort and who has their best interests at heart. Okay, should we move on to the next question? Okay, so which team member most often carries the day? Bless you, Roger. Which team member most often carries the day? Are we getting good text answers? let me know when we have achieved critical mass. Or at least if someone's ready to speak up about what
Oh,
they
Lisa, we are seeing
Yeah.
a pattern. I've got B, B, B or D. That's me. I'm waffling. A, F, B, B, D. I mean, there's a lot of people who think that the project manager is carrying the day. And then Lorraine Demoy said it depends on the day, that she originally answered B, but she thinks it might be F.
Uh,
No.
That feels like the easy way out, so I apologize for that. But as I'm listening to all of, the stories and thoughts, it's just, I just feel like there's no pattern.
and you are absolutely right. You're
Trick
absolutely right.
question. Another trick
It
question.
was a trick question. So you never know. You have no idea who's going to carry the day. You start to get a sense of it in interview prep and rehearsal, who is really killing it. And you hope they will connect in the room in that same way. But we're all human, and what worked one day might not work quite as sensationally the next. Someone else may step up. Maybe it's for designers, maybe it's a facilities intensive selection committee. They're going to want something very different. They're going to really want to trust and hear from that project manager. Other times it's the programmer. If you have a really fun and sparky and warm and interesting programmer, highlight them. Give them a big role in the interview. They're going to set the tone for your team in the project anyway. But the simple fact of it is, you get a sense of it in interview prep. You hope everybody feels confident and comfortable enough to be themselves and to rise to the occasion that day. But there's really no way to know, as long as somebody does. And ideally, more than one somebody does. Okay, next question.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sure.
I just wanted to ask
Yeah.
a follow-up. So are you saying that you think that even if let's say the selection committee, really the PM is really important, that role is the thing that was important to them, but if they don't necessarily shine, if they're not who the selection committee connected to, but connected to someone else, do you feel, or in your experience, that other person can still sway them in an emotional way?
So what I have learned over the years is that the emotions connected to project managers in particular, the positive ones tend to be relief, comfort, reassurance, confidence. Often project managers don't have the most dynamic part of a presentation, let me just say that, and can easily get too far in the weeds or forget why they're actually talking about a certain topic or issue, get off track, etc. So this is not at all to pick on project managers in any way. It's just to say that expectations for project managers are very practical. So if you happen to have a project manager who is charismatic and warm and dynamic and a great speaker and has an unbelievable track record of bringing projects in on time, on budget, don't ever let that person go, and give them a huge raise. That's my advice.
Hang on to
I should know-
unicorns.
Hang on to unicorns. Good advice for everybody. I should mention that it is a little just after 9:30, which is our time. Of course, we started a little bit late today. So I'd like to suggest, Lisa, if you have time to keep going, and anybody that wants to stay on with us, you're welcome to hang out and hear some more of the questions and answers.
And this is being recorded, and it will be posted to the VSA site in about a week or two. So you can always watch the end if you can't stay.
Thank you. Okay, so how about this one? As a member of the selection committee, what do I fear the most? Again, I think about this often. please let me know when we have some answers. You know, I think this is really thinking about the selection committee is a good idea in general. You know, if they give you the names of the people who are on the selection committee, find out who they are, what they care about, what their role is. Do as much research as you can. But this is a sort of a deeper question too. You know, this is sort of a big picture. What do I fear most? Anybody want to speak up about why they chose A, B, C, D, E, or F?
Let me just speak up on behalf of the chat. There's a lot of E, there's a little bit of E and F.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Who's going to stand up for E? Talk to me about E.
I can say, I can chime in here. I just feel like I voted for E, and I feel like A, B, and C, and D. It's either something that can be sort of revisited during the process, or it's not a responsibility of selection committee. So like project going over budget, I don't think that's the responsibility of the selection committee. Project doesn't, not getting funding is also not the responsibility of selection committee. I mean, there are things that are related. I mean, obviously depending on who they choose, but I think ultimately those sort of don't fall into the lap of the selection committee. Whereas I feel like the program not achieving the mission, I think that is in my opinion, has a direct correlation with which team they choose, because the design team is gonna basically promise that they're gonna deliver X, Y, Z. But then if it's just bad design, you can always redesign, for example. Whereas the program not achieving the mission, it feels like that sort of an assessment that happens after the building has been built or the project has been completed, and if it does not deliver, then it's sort of too late to sort of go back, right? Which is why I thought E probably makes the most sense.
Lisa, if I'd like to jump in and agree with that. I've actually been a client on the other side of it, putting a lot of work into a project. And the fear that it doesn't meet your needs at the end is, I think, the biggest fear. If you go over budget a little bit, sure, to get what you want. But if you're still regretting 10 years later that you didn't have enough storage or you didn't have enough spaces, your spaces are too small, it's devastating.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Hi, Lisa. This is Jen Tulipani. How are you?
Hi.
I just, what I wrote was, I really think the selection committee, fears their choices. And one of their choices could be selecting the wrong team, because I think all of the other things that you listed are sort of fixable, like bad design, that's subjective. What I think is good design, someone else might think is bad design. Programmatically, there's always ways to sort of reconfigure spaces, maybe adding more storage, but selecting like a wrong team, like that's, what keeps people up at night. Their reputation is on the line with this selection. And if they just select something that's bad, that's construed as bad, maybe for all of these reasons, but I think a good team, selecting the right team would be able to overcome all of these sort of smaller obstacles or roadblocks.
And I agree with you. So in my mind, as I think about these questions, and by the way, none of those outcomes that are listed are good. But to me, as a member of the selection committee, what I fear most is public embarrassment, humiliation for making a bad choice, for being called out for making a bad choice. And so if we think about that, if we keep that top of mind, really at the interview, our primary job is to help that committee, the entire committee, but those individual selection committee members feel really good and well protected, and that their decision is strong, and that you're de-risking this whole process for them. Okay, next question. You know, I talk about fatal flaws, deal killers all the time in interview prep. I'm sure you realize none of these are great. I would say nervousness is not a negative. So in that sense, that is, you know, that's the trick part of this question. Everyone gets nervous. When you're nervous, it's because you care. You're nervous because you want it. And you hope you have the skills and you're able to perform on that given day and show how smart you are and how great you are, and that you're really skilled at what you do. So I hope people did not pick nervousness. Nervousness is something everyone has to some degree or another. So I'd love to hear from someone who picked one of the other choices.
Voice in the chat here to say that we've got a lot of B's, a couple of D's, and an A. So right now, rudeness to team members is seeming like a deal killer to some folks.
So I'd love to hear from you about what you've chosen and why you picked that particular reason or occurrence or situation.
I'll say that I picked B, rudeness to team members, because this is your finest hour and your best day. And if that's the best you can do on your best day, it's indicative of how you're going to treat the rest of everybody connected with the project throughout. It indicates a level of discord, uncoordination, and strife that you wouldn't sign up for if you had the choice.
Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. And also, you tend not to like people who are rude, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
Well put. Yeah.
No, I voted for D because I feel like when it comes to rudeness, you know, coming from a minority background, you know, there could be a lot of things that are lost in translation. So, you know, some people would say certain things that might not necessarily be, you know, they didn't intend it to be rude, but, you know, it might be perceived as rude. So I feel like there's a little bit of a, you know, there's a room for things getting lost in translation when it comes to, you know, what some people would consider as rude when it wasn't really intended. Whereas I feel like D, not addressing the topics you were asked to speak to, that speaks about, you know, you either not understanding what the intent is or you not following the direction of the client. And I think when there's sort of that sort of a gap between, you know, what's being asked of you, I think that's a larger problem, you know, down the road, which is why I thought that D would be a little more appropriate answer, although, you know, maybe there is no right answer.
Anyone else? I think that's good, by the way, and I agree with you. I think as far as how I think about this question, if you get into the room and you are behaving badly, you're arrogant, you're rude to the other people on your team, you've already lost. It's unrecoverable. If you are incapable, unwilling to be a solid professional and someone that I will actually enjoy working with, it's gone. That's unrecoverable. Remember, it's first date behavior. If you want a second date, are you going to get one if you're rude or mean or condescending or dismissive? If you talk over people, if you interrupt them, disparage them, pick your favorite. That's really a very extreme behavior. It comes from stress. It comes from, sometimes people are naturally like that, right? But most of the time, architects are very kind and generous and smart people. Engineers are very kind and generous and smart people. People in the construction profession also very good at what they do. So it's unusual to find someone who is behaving that way. When it happens, good luck to yourself. Next slide, please. And I think, this is one that we should spend a little bit of time on. Projects are won and lost when? Okay, does anybody want to speak up about what they picked and why?
Well, it depends on the type of proposal that you're going after. What I have learned recently that when you go after a higher education project, you already lose the project when the team is put together. If you don't have the right team. And I know it sounds very basic, but if you want to get to the interview, you need to get that right first. But it might not happen with every, proposal.
Well, you're certainly right in terms of the fact that the proposal that you put together, the team that you put forward, has to be strong enough for you to advance to the shortlist. Because if you don't get to the shortlist, you're certainly not going to win the project. Any other ideas, thoughts?
This is Jen Tulipani again. I answered A and or E, because I think that during the Q&A, you really get to see who the people are and how they're interacting, in a more, normal format. This isn't their, sort of canned speech. This is them having to speak candidly. So I think, putting together the right team, of course, is the most important thing in the beginning. But how they respond during Q&A is where they'll develop that trust and confidence from the client or owner side.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It seems like, speaking up for the chat, we're kind of all over the place. There's a bunch of Fs. There's some As and Es. Sharon Gray and I are on the same page. We kind of both said, when thinking through why you are right for the client and job, and I sort of wrote that it's lost when teams begin to strategize. But I'm really liking these A answers too.
Nobody picked D.
Did anybody pick C? Because I was just laughing to myself as I put that one in there thinking, oh, that's very self-serving.
Oh, right, of course.
So I think all of these are moments, are points in the process where the team is losing some momentum, where you're not optimizing, you're not coming through this funnel in a strong way. You can drop the ball, as Kate has said, at the very first day, you read the RFP and think, is this one worth going after? Is this worth our time? Do we have a shot at this? All of that is true too. So keep in mind, even including Kate's other F, these are all important moments where you can drop the ball. My answer to this is F as well. And I think it's F because projects are won and lost in the 5 to 10 minutes after you leave the room. What did you leave them with? What 3 things are they going to remember about you, your team, your presentation, the case you are making? Because the stickier those 3 things are and the stronger they are, the more they will be top of mind when the committee reconvenes to deliberate. So I know that's a way of saying you're sort of outside the lines, you've left the room, there's really nothing more you can do. But if during prep or when you're putting the team together, the proposal together, you really think about getting to the interview and then those 5 or 10 minutes after you've left the room, and the points you want to leave them with, the impression you want to leave them with, you'll have stronger presentations, greater success, and it'll just be a tighter, more compelling interview overall. So I think that is that's all of the formal material that I've prepared. I'm happy to stay and talk a little bit more if you want to do that.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
And thank you to everybody who attended and was brave enough to enter their multiple choice answers in the chat. Sorry for losing the anonymization, but it was really interesting to hear everybody's perspective.
Well, thank you all. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. If you want to discuss any of this further or dig in a little bit more on some of these specific slides or tips or different approaches, I'm happy to do that. And thank you to Sandy and Kate for organizing this whole thing. I'm a little horrified to imagine watching this on the BSA website in a week or two, but continuous improvement.
It's all good. And your slides are beautiful, by the way. I really loved your presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Really nicely done.
It's so lovely seeing so many familiar faces. I look forward to the day when I can see your familiar faces in person. Until then, good luck, everybody. Go out there, win. Go win.
I know. That's it.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.